All right, so the gradient that I've applied to my ping pong paddle cushion so far is all very well and good, by which I mean nasty and ghastly and awful. And so why don't we replace it with a good gradient? Something that might produce an actual desirable effect, like this one here. This is the final gradient effect.ai illustration, and you can see that we've got a nice bright red up here in the upper left region of the cushion, and this is that original red that I had applied as a flat fill to the cushion in the first place. And then down in the lower right region, we have a darker version of that same red, and it's nicely saturated, and it's warm, and it's rich, and it's vibrant, and blah, blah, blah. So that's what we want. I'm going to return to my document, pingpongpaddle.ai, and let's just go ahead and reset this entire experience at this point. Now, I want to, let's say, switch back to my original red fill, but if I click this little color icon down here at the bottom of the toolbox, or if I try out its keyboard shortcut of the comma key, then I'm going to fill my cushion with white, which is not what I want. So I've lost my original color. How did that happen? Well, that white happens to be the last color I touched on. And for you, it might be some other color entirely. So to restore the red, here's what you do. You press Control-Z, Command-Z on a Mac. To get back your gradient, you just click on one of these color stops. And notice, by virtue of the fact you clicked on a red color stop, very important that you click on one of your original reds. Then you're going to assign red to the color inside the color palette, and you're also going to assign it down here to this tiny little color icon down here at the bottom of the toolbox. Now, if you press comma, you're going to fill the paddle with red. All right, now I want to make that red part of a new gradient. Well, I've kind of goofed up my default gradient here inside the gradient palette. So what I'm going to have to do is click off the paddle for a moment in order to deselect it. Then I'll switch over to black-white, that black-white gradient right there. Now I'll go ahead and click on the paddle cushion again to select it. And working inside the color palette, this is the easiest way to go. You want to make sure your fill's active right there. And I'll go ahead and drag that fill color, and I'll drop it on the far left side of this gradient bar right here in order to make it the first color in the gradient. So I replaced white with that red. Now I still have black over on the other side. What do I do about that? Well, I'm going to take advantage of the color guide palette. And we talked a little bit about the color guide palette back in the fundamentals portion of the series. We're going to discuss the palette in even greater detail when we discuss live color in the final mastery portion of this series. But in the meantime, you can see that what we're seeing inside the color guide palette is not only the active color, which is this red, but also some various complementary colors, colors that go along with that color, I should say. And you can switch your harmony rule to something else if you want to. I've got it right now set to Triad 2. You might see some other cluster of colors going on up there. But what I really want for this effect, for creating a gradient, this tends to work really nicely, what I want is shades. So go ahead and switch to the shades option right there. And then you're going to see a series of shades represented here inside the color guide palette. And then I could say, you know what, this guy right there, this darker shade that's also nicely saturated, really a rich color, would make a great end color for my gradient. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to drag it and drop it onto the black color swatch like so, in order to replace that final color with that red. Now, with this final color stop selected, which it is, it's active, and you can tell it's active because see how they're little houses? If the house has a tiny little black roof, it's active. If the house has a tiny little white roof, it's not active. How's that for intuitive? Actually, I think it makes a fair amount of sense, I do have to admit. But that's how it works. So the little tiny roof tells you who's selected and who's not. Go back to the color palette, and let's go ahead and dial in a slightly different version of this color. Just tidy up the values. I'm going to change the cyan value to 25. 100 for magenta is fine. For yellow, I think I'll back it off to 70%. And then for black, I'm going to raise that value to 50% like so. So we have something darker to work with. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and change this angle value right here. I could change it to 45 degrees. I want it to be diagonal, and I'll press Tab. And you'll see that that's not really what I want, because that means that the gradient is going to go up and to the right, which is a 45-degree angle. Starting at the light red and going to the dark red, I really want it to go down and to the right. So I'm going to change that value from positive 45 to negative 45, just like that. And then press the Tab key. And there we have it. That is exactly the gradient that I want to apply to this paddle cushion. Now, there's a little more going on where this cushion is concerned. It has nothing to do with gradients, has everything to do with tile patterns, which is the topic of a chapter coming up, a couple chapters from now. And you can see that tile pattern right there, these little sort of doohickeys that are appearing inside of the paddle cushion. We will apply those little guys, that little bit of texture there, in the very next exercise.